Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking what is easily the greatest, most complex, and honestly, the most consequential software upgrade in the history of our planet. We're talking about the evolution of the human mind. We're going to trace this unbelievable arc, going from pure instinct-driven survival in the darkest caves, all the way to the complex, philosophical thought that defines us today.
Okay, let's dive right into this. I want you to take a second and contrast yourself with your earliest ancestors. I mean, it's truly mind-blowing when you think about it. Right now, you're sitting there with this incredible modern ability to read, to analyze abstract concepts, to watch this explainer, and to ponder your own existence. But if we rewind the clock, our ancestors definitely didn't have the luxury of philosophy. They were literally hiding from apex predators during the Ice Age. Their brains were entirely focused on the immediate, terrifying present. So how exactly did we cross that massive canyon from mere survival to actual consciousness?
Just look at the constant vigilance required in this prehistoric reality. The world was dark, it was scary, and it was completely unforgiving. Our physical brains had to adapt just to keep our bodies alive. The human mind back then was largely reactive. You hear a twig snap in the dark, boom, your brain floods with fear, and you run. This terrifying pressure was the harsh crucible that essentially forced our early hardware to adapt.
Section 1. The Spark of Consciousness.
For millions of years, the precursor to the modern human mind functioned a whole lot like an animal mind. It was driven almost entirely by instinct, repetition, and immediate physical needs, like finding food or a place to sleep. Early human species, like the Neanderthals, were originally driven by this instinctual fear. But then, something miraculous happened. A spark, a profound shift toward imagination and conscious thought. Instead of just reacting to their environment, early humans began to actually hold concepts in their minds, connecting complex ideas together. And that right there is the very spark that separated us from the beasts.
Now, this transition from a fearful, mute existence to a life guided by conscious thought, it definitely didn't happen overnight. Our ancestors were absolutely terrified of the dark, terrified of storms, and terrified of the wild animals hunting them. It's kind of wild to realize that our modern, analytical minds were literally forged in the fires of prehistoric anxiety. Our ancestors started to use their newly developing imagination not just to hide, but to predict, to plan, and to outsmart the environment that was constantly trying to kill them.
Which brings us to version 1.0, the invention of language.
Think about how a baby learns to speak today. They babble, right? They imitate. Well, early human language developed in a remarkably similar way. First, our ancestors started by imitating the sounds of nature and the animals around them, the rustling of trees, the roar of rushing water, the call of a bird. Slowly, over vast stretches of time, these imitative noises were refined into distinct intentional syllables. And finally, we made the greatest leap, developing grammatical rules to string those syllables together into complex, meaningful sentences.
It's actually fascinating to look at the sheer primal nature of our vocal origins. Early researchers literally tried to create a quote-unquote dictionary of monkey language, and they found distinct primitive sounds. For example, they recorded sounds like tits-tez to express anger or disgust, and a sort of ha-ha sound to express joy and playfulness. It's a bit funny to think about, but those basic emotional grunts and vocalizations, they are the primitive roots from which all human poetry, science, and debate eventually sprouted.
Just look at that number, 250,000. To put that into perspective, we went from starting out with a handful of emotional grunts and nature imitations to a modern language like English today that boasts well over 250,000 words. The sheer scale of this cognitive expansion is absolutely breathtaking. We went from basically warning each other about a tiger in the bushes to having the vocabulary to discuss quantum physics and global economics.
Section 3, version 2.0, from pictures to alphabets.
And this brilliantly illustrates that exact turning point. Before we had letters or keyboards, early humans drew on cave walls. This was the very first attempt in human history to record ideas outside of the physical brain. It was a way of saying, hey, I was here, I saw this, and I want you to know about it even when I'm not standing right here to tell you. It's literally the grandfather of all modern text.
Once we figured out we could record thoughts visually, communication technology accelerated at a breakneck pace. We started with those simple cave drawings. Then, the Sumerians in Mesopotamia began pressing cuneiform shapes into wet clay. The Egyptians took it a massive step further by creating hieroglyphs and writing them on lightweight papyrus, which made information portable. And finally, the Phoenicians developed the alphabet.
The invention of the alphabet was truly the ultimate cheat code for human civilization. I mean, instead of memorizing thousands of different pictures for thousands of different words, the Phoenician alphabet broke human communication down into a small set of basic sound symbols. You could combine a couple dozen symbols to represent absolutely any sound the human mouth could make. It meant that for the very first time, human knowledge could outlive the person who spoke it. Information became immortal, a real game changer.
Section 4. Coping mechanisms and the emergence of myths.
You know, we often think of myths today as just entertaining fairy tales. But for our ancestors, they were way more than that. Myth and magic were essential psychological survival tools. They were early humanity's attempt to make sense of and exert some level of control over the terrifying, unpredictable natural forces that constantly threatened to wipe them out.
Imagine being an early human, completely lacking any modern scientific understanding. You look up and see a solar eclipse turning day into night. No way, right? You experience massive thunderstorms with deafening lightning, or devastating floods that literally wash away your entire camp. Because they couldn't scientifically explain these phenomena, their highly active imaginations filled in the blanks. They began to believe that nature was driven by unseen spirits, demons, or gods that desperately needed to be appeased.
The contrast here is absolutely crucial. Without myth, early humans faced primitive fear, an utter, paralyzing helplessness against the random chaos of the world. But with mythological control, by inventing gods of thunder, spirits of the river, and rituals to appease them, early humans gained a psychological sense of agency. The invention of these early belief systems was a direct, visceral response to fear. It was humanity trying to negotiate a peace treaty with a terrifying and arbitrary universe.
And that brings us to Section 5, the climax, the dawn of philosophy.
So what does this all mean? The crucial point is understanding this exact pivot. Mythological thinking was all about finding psychological comfort. It used stories and magic to make the dark just a little less scary. But philosophical thinking, introduced by early thinkers like the Greeks, was radically different. It was about seeking objective truth. It was about setting aside those comforting stories to look for strict logical rules, cause and effect, and the fundamental mechanical essence of reality.
This quote perfectly captures the Platonic shift that really changed everything. Humanity was finally using reason to decode the actual mechanics of the universe. Instead of assuming a thunderstorm was an angry god throwing a tantrum, philosophy asked, what is the physical nature of the cloud? What is the essence of the lightning? We basically stopped hiding from nature, and we started studying it.
The journey of human thought we just traced is nothing short of miraculous. We started at the absolute bottom, driven by pure, reactive, physical survival. Then, our brains upgraded, sparking an imagination that created languages and myths to cope with our fears. Finally, we upgraded again, developing writing and applying strict logic to seek objective truth. Every single step built the foundation for the modern mind you are using right this very second. The whole shebang.
Which leaves us with one incredibly exciting and honestly perhaps slightly daunting final thought. Our minds spent millions of years evolving specifically to conquer and understand the natural world around us. Now that we've mapped the globe, split the atom, and decoded our own DNA, what exactly will our minds evolve to conquer next? Really think about that. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time as we continue to decode the fascinating world around us.